Damien Adebayo had always believed that wealth was not just power, but proof of superiority. He grew up inside marble halls under chandeliers that never dimmed, and around people who bowed before money, even when they hated the hands that held it. As a boy, he never heard the word no for long enough to respect it. As a teenager, he learned that apologies could be replaced with gifts, and consequences could be buried beneath his family name. As a young man, he became dangerous in the quiet, polished way of those who mistake privilege for personal greatness. When Damien entered a room, he did not simply want attention. He expected it. He had his father's height, his mother's taste, and the sharp confidence of someone who had never truly lost anything important. He returned to Lagos from London dressed like a magazine cover and carrying himself like the city had been waiting for his arrival. At the airport, photographers caught the Adebayo Heir stepping out in tailored charcoal linen, with dark glasses and a gold watch that cost more than most families spent in a year. People looked and whispered, "The son is back." The future head of Adebayo Holdings, the only heir, the golden child. Damien enjoyed every stare like a man drinking from a cup he believed would never empty. His mother, Veronica, met him at the mansion with open arms and a smile sharpened by ambition. She was the kind of woman who wore elegance like armor and saw human beings in levels. In her world, money was not just comfort. It was moral confirmation. The rich had done something right. The poor had failed somewhere. She kissed her son's cheeks and stepped back to admire him. "My son," she said, "look at you. London has refined you even more. Handsome, expensive, confident. This country is not ready for you." Damien laughed lightly and handed his coat to a waiting houseboy. "I missed home food," he said. "I missed being treated properly." Veronica laughed too, because to her that was not arrogance. It was bloodline. She guided him through the sprawling house where framed family portraits lined the walls and every polished surface reflected wealth without effort. "Your father is waiting in the study," she said. "He wants to talk about your future in the company." Damien loosened his cuff and smiled. "Good," he said. "It is time he stopped talking to me like a child." Veronica touched his arm and lowered her voice. "Your father respects discipline more than brilliance. Remember that when you speak to him. He likes to test men before rewarding them." Damien smirked. "Humility is for people still competing for position. I am the position." Veronica should have corrected him. Instead, she only laughed and said, "That confidence is why you are my son." In the study, Chief Adebayo sat behind a wide mahogany desk with files neatly arranged before him. He was older now. His hair carried more silver than black, and his face had been carved by years of hard decisions. But his eyes were still exacting. He had built an empire out of transport logistics, oil contracts, land, and stubborn refusal to fail. He knew the smell of hunger because he had lived with it. He knew the price of collapse because he had stood near it. He also knew the difference between a man who had earned hardship and one who had only inherited comfort. "Sit down, Damien," he said. Damien obeyed. "Good afternoon, Father." Chief Adebayo watched him carefully. "You are back from school. You have traveled. You have enjoyed enough of my money. Now let us see whether you are ready for responsibility." Damien leaned forward calmly. "I am ready." Chief Adebayo did not smile. "Are you? Because from everything I have seen, you are careless with money, careless with women, careless with time. You move as if your surname is a shield against character." Damien's jaw tightened. "That is unfair." "Is it? Tell me one hard thing you have built. One difficult situation you endured without using my name. One respect you earned that did not arrive because doors opened at the sound of Adebayo. Damien resisted the heat rising in his chest. I studied finance at one of the best schools in London. I understand business. Chief Adebayo nodded slowly. A degree is not discipline. Intelligence is not depth. And money in the wrong hands becomes a weapon. Damien exhaled. Then what exactly are you saying? Chief Adebayo rose from his chair and walked toward the glass windows overlooking the garden. I am saying I will not place my company in the hands of a man who cannot govern himself. He turned back. You want an executive seat. You want influence. You want my full confidence. Then prove you are becoming a man and not merely remaining an heir. Damien folded his arms. How? Chief Adebayo's voice became deliberate. Within 3 months, bring me a woman of character and marry her. Not a social butterfly, not another party fixture, not a gold digger. A disciplined woman, a steady woman, someone whose values can influence your life for good. Damien stared in disbelief. Marriage? That is your test? Yes, said Chief Adebayo, because the woman a man chooses reveals the future he deserves. Damien almost laughed. You want me to qualify for business through matrimony? I want to see whether you can recognize substance over surface, Chief Adebayo replied. Bring me such a woman within 3 months, and I will give you the executive role you want, and begin the process of transferring a major block of shares to your name. Damien's eyes sharpened. And if I do not? Then you get nothing. Silence stretched between them. Damien's mind was already working like a gambler measuring angles. He did not care about marriage, but he cared about leverage. Fine, he said at last. I will bring you your saint. That evening, Veronica poured wine into a crystal glass and studied her son as he paced across the lounge. This is not impossible, she said. Marriage is paperwork, dress codes, and public smiles. We will solve it quickly. Damien rubbed his jaw. The problem is not marriage. The problem is the kind of women I know. Veronica shrugged. Then call them. There must be at least one who can act decent for a few months. Damien took out his phone and dialed Vanessa. She answered with music in the background and amusement already in her voice. Damien, what a surprise! He leaned into the sofa and lowered his tone. I have been thinking. Maybe we should settle down. Vanessa laughed so hard he had to hold the phone away from his ear. Settle down with you? Damien, be serious. You lie too easily to make a husband. The line died. Damien cursed under his breath. Ungrateful, he muttered. Next, he called Brielle. She answered after 2 rings. Brielle, it is me. Listen, what would you say if I told you I am considering marriage? Brielle did not hesitate. I would ask which version of you is speaking, the sober one or the cheating one? The call ended. Damien's face darkened. He tried Chloe next. Her response was colder than the others. Ambition, she said. Damien, you are not ambitious. You are arrogant. Goodbye. He threw the phone onto the table. These women are ridiculous. Veronica swirled her wine. No, they know too much about you, and your father will investigate all of them. He will dig until he finds reasons to reject every single one. Damien pressed his fingers against his temple. So what do I do? Marry a random choir girl at church? Before Veronica answered, Toby entered the room. Toby had been Damien's friend since secondary school and possessed the type of cleverness that survives by reading powerful people accurately. He heard the last line and smiled. Or marry someone humble. Damien looked up. Explain. Toby sat down and crossed one leg over the other. Stop chasing women who see themselves as your equals. Find someone decent. Educated, yes, but ordinary. Someone with a clean reputation. Someone who will endure almost anything because she sees your world as opportunity. Veronica's eyes brightened. A woman with manners and no real power of her own. Damien slowly smiled, and something strategic awakened in him. That is not a bad idea. Veronica leaned forward. Who in your circles fits that? Damien's mind began scanning faces and family connections until one image settled quietly into place. A young woman in a blue dress from that morning. Calm face, hair tied back, eyes that lowered respectfully when she greeted elders. Who was that girl with Grace today? He asked. Veronica frowned. Which girl? The one in the blue dress. Calm face. Veronica thought for a moment. Then her expression changed slightly. Amara, she corrected herself. No, Adora. Grace's daughter. Damien sat straighter. Grace's daughter? Yes, Veronica said. She is in her final year at university. Intelligent girl. Too quiet for my taste. Damien's smile deepened. Does father like her? Veronica nodded. Very much. He paid her school fees after her father died. He always says she reminds him of discipline. Damien stood up as if the matter had just solved itself. Perfect. Veronica stared at him. You cannot be serious. Why not? She is exactly what father asked for. Polite, educated, clean background, no scandals. If I bring a Deora, he will have no reason to object. Veronica's lips tightened. People in our circle will talk. My son, heir to Adebayo Holdings, marrying the daughter of a woman who works in our house. Damien walked toward the bar and poured himself a drink. I am not marrying for romance, Mother. I am solving a problem. Once father gives me the position and the shares, everything else becomes manageable. Veronica studied him and finally asked in a lower voice, You really intend to use this girl as a bridge? Damien lifted his glass. Bridge. Key. Strategy. Call it whatever you like. I only need you to support me. Veronica hesitated just long enough to reveal the little shame she still possessed. Then ambition covered it. Very well, but let one thing be clear. Grace and her daughter will never be our equals. Damien drank without emotion. I never said they would be. The next afternoon, Grace was summoned to Veronica's private sitting room. She entered with careful steps, her hands folded before her. Grace had spent years mastering invisibility. She knew how to be present without disturbing powerful moods and useful without becoming memorable. She was still beautiful, in a quiet, weathered way. The kind of beauty life had not erased, but had taught to speak softly. Madam, you sent for me. Veronica did not ask her to sit. My son wants to marry your daughter. Grace blinked once, as if the sentence had arrived in the wrong room. Madam, pardon. Veronica repeated it slowly, as though speaking to someone hard of hearing. Damien wishes to marry Adaora. Where is the confusion? Grace's heart began to pound. "That cannot be a simple matter, madam." Veronica's voice cooled. "It is a very simple matter. A wealthy, educated young man from one of the most respected families in this country has chosen your daughter. What exactly is difficult to understand?" Grace swallowed carefully. "I have watched Master Damien grow. He is not an easy man." Veronica's eyes narrowed. "Be careful, Grace." "I am only speaking as a mother," Grace said quietly. "My daughter is gentle. I do not want her to suffer." Before Veronica could reply, Chief Adebayo entered. He had heard enough to understand the air in the room. "Let her speak," he said. Grace lowered her head respectfully. "Sir." Chief Adebayo faced her with unusual gentleness. "Grace, I know my son has flaws. I will not insult your intelligence by pretending otherwise. But I am hoping marriage to a steady woman may help him grow." Grace gave a sad, faint smile. "Sir, hope is not always enough." "True," Chief Adebayo answered. "That is why I am also giving you my word. If this marriage happens, after the wedding, you will stop working in this house. I will open a proper fabric business for you and settle you comfortably. You have served faithfully for years." Grace's eyes filled instantly. "Sir, you have already done too much for me and my daughter." "Then let this be the completion of a promise," he said. She lowered her face. "I will speak to Adaora." That night, in the small staff quarters behind the main house, Adaora sat by the window, reading notes for her final architecture review, when Grace entered with a silence too heavy to ignore. "Mama, what happened?" Grace sat on the edge of the bed and took longer than usual to answer. "Master Damien wants to marry you." Adora stared, then laughed once in disbelief. "No." Grace nodded slowly. "That was my first answer too." "Then why are we still discussing it?" "Because Chief Adebayo spoke to me himself." Adora closed the book and set it aside. "Mama, you know the kind of man Damien is. He is proud. He speaks to people as though they are beneath him. I have watched how he treats drivers, waiters, security guards, even you." Grace looked down. "I know." "Then why would you want this for me?" Adora asked, and there was no rebellion in her voice, only pain. Grace held her daughter's hand. "Because life is not always a choice between good and bad. Sometimes it is a choice between danger you know and debt you cannot ignore." Adora's eyes softened. "Mama." "Listen to me," Grace said. "When your father died, we had nothing. Nothing. Chief Adebayo kept us standing. He paid your school fees. He made sure we did not starve. Today, he promised to retire me and set me up with a business if this marriage happens." Adora stood and walked toward the door, as if she needed distance to think. "So I should marry out of gratitude?" "No, I am not commanding you." Grace's voice cracked. "I am telling you the weight of the moment." Adora stared into the dark courtyard outside. "If I say yes, it will not be because I love Damien. I know. It will be because I respect Chief Adebayo, and because I do not want you serving forever." Grace began to cry softly. "My daughter, I pray this decision does not wound you more than life already has." Adora turned back and forced a weak smile. If God sees my heart, maybe he will make a way. From that moment, preparations moved quickly, because rich families know how to speed up appearances when appearances are useful. An informal introduction dinner was arranged. Chief Adebayo announced the understanding to a few close associates. Veronica supervised fabrics and jewels like a general overseeing war supplies. Damien behaved charmingly in public and impatiently in private. He said little to Adora beyond what was necessary, and when he did, his words sounded less like affection and more like ownership. "So you said yes," he told her one afternoon in the library. "Good. That makes things easier." "Easier?" she asked. "Weddings are stressful," he said. "I prefer efficiency." Chief Adebayo happened to enter at that moment, and his face hardened. "This is not a business merger, Damien. If Adora is agreeing to marry you, treat that with honor. Do you understand?" Damien lowered his gaze just enough to perform humility. "Yes, father." Chief Adebayo then turned to Adora. "If my son disrespects you, come to me." "Yes, sir," she answered. Veronica cut in smoothly. "Before the wedding, perhaps Adora should move into the guest wing near Damien. She needs to learn his routine, his home, his standards." Grace, who had come to help serve tea, looked alarmed. "Madam, is that necessary?" Chief Adebayo considered it. "The house is large. They will not share a room before marriage." "But perhaps it may help them understand each other better." Grace looked uneasy. Chief Adebayo noticed and added, "If at any point your daughter is uncomfortable, she returns immediately." Damien smirked. "Father, you talk as if I am a criminal." "Then do not behave like one," Chief Adebayo replied. What followed over the next weeks became a slow schooling in humiliation. The first wound came through something so small it would have seemed meaningless to everyone except the one expected to surrender it. Adora was standing on the balcony one evening when Damien noticed the bracelet on her wrist. It was old silver, slightly worn with a simple engraved clasp. "What is that?" he asked. She touched it instinctively. "My father gave it to my mother. She gave it to me after he died." Damien frowned. "That old thing?" "Take it off." "No," Adora answered without thinking. Damien looked at her more sharply. "Adora, you are engaged to me now. Everything about you must change." "Not everything," she said. "Especially not your taste." "That bracelet looks cheap." "It is not about price." He stepped closer. "It is about image. You cannot stand beside me wearing sentiment that looks like roadside metal." Adora held his gaze for one tense second. "It is precious to me." "Fine," he said coldly. "Keep it in a drawer, but do not wear it when people can see you." "I will wear what reminds me who I am," she said quietly. Damien's smile was humorless. "That is exactly the problem. I am trying to upgrade you, and you keep clinging to where you came from." The next insult came disguised as generosity. Adora was leaving for campus in a simple mustard blouse and dark skirt when Damien stopped her with visible irritation. "You are not going to class dressed like that." "Like what?" "Like a student who cannot afford imagination. Go upstairs. Change." "I am comfortable," she said. "My fiancé comfort is now my concern." Combating, Dozes stepped forward from beside the car. "Yes, sir?" "Take us to Maison Elise." Adora stared. "Damien, I have lectures." "Then you will miss one." Education did not teach you presentation, so I will. At the boutique, saleswomen rushed around them with trained enthusiasm. Welcome, sir. Damien barely looked at them. Bring gowns, heels, handbags, everything new. She is starting over. Adora stood stiffly among racks of imported silk. This is not my style. Exactly, Damien replied. I prefer simple clothes. Simplicity is often just poverty trying to sound noble. That is cruel. It is honest, he said. If people look at you and still see Grace, daughter, before they see Damien Adebayo, fiancé, then I have failed. Adora folded her hands tightly. Maybe what you call improvement is just control. Damien glanced at her in the mirror. Call it whatever you like, but you are leaving here looking expensive. When they returned, Veronica approved the purchases with a satisfied nod. Better, she said. Much better. Adora wore the new clothes because resistance had begun to exhaust her. But each compliment felt like a theft. She started moving through the mansion like someone watching herself from outside. Her books remained her only private territory. She spent longer hours on studio drawings and campus work because architecture still obeyed lines and structure, even when life refused to. A few times, she tried to speak honestly with Veronica. "Madam, may I speak freely?" she asked one afternoon. "That depends on what you want to say." Adora drew a breath. Damien keeps insulting me. He corrects everything I do as if I am a project, not a person. Veronica continued arranging flowers while answering. Men under pressure can be difficult. This feels deeper than pressure. Men from powerful homes are not always soft, she said. Marriage is sacrifice. Respect should not be a sacrifice. Veronica's expression hardened. Be careful, Adora. Many women would consider your place in this house a miracle. Do not start sounding ungrateful because my son has standards. I am not ungrateful. I only want dignity. Veronica finally turned toward her. Dignity. My son agreed to marry you. That in itself is dignity. Go and learn patience. Adora walked away before the tears in her eyes could turn into shame that Veronica might enjoy. The house seemed to notice everything and protect nothing. Servants saw the tightening in Adora's shoulders. Moses saw the way she sometimes paused before entering a room if Damien's voice was inside it. Grace saw it too, and fear sat heavier on her chest each day. But all of them remained trapped by a system older than any single insult. Wealth breeds witnesses who are taught silence is survival. One evening, that silence cracked a little. Toby arrived with Vanessa for drinks in Damien's private lounge. Adora was upstairs studying, and Moses was in the corridor outside, waiting for instructions. The door remained slightly open because service in rich homes requires invisibility without distance. Vanessa laughed as she accepted a glass. So it is true. You are really marrying that quiet girl. Damien sprawled into the leather chair. Relax. It is strategy, not romance. Strategy? Vanessa lifted a brow. My father wanted a woman with character, Damien said. I found the cleanest one around. Once the wedding is done and I get what I want in the company, everything changes. Meaning? Vanessa asked. Meaning, he said with a smug shrug. I did not suddenly become a village saint. I am buying time. And what happens to her after? Vanessa pressed. Damien sipped his drink. We will see. Divorce exists for a reason. Vanessa laughed. Poor girl. She actually looks like the type who would love sincerely. That is her problem, not mine, Damien said quietly. Moses stood outside like stone, but inside, something hot and old shifted. He had served too long to be surprised by the sins of the wealthy. But this was different. He had watched Grace survive humiliation with bowed shoulders, and Adora enter the house like a daughter being handed towards safety, only to discover she was merely being offered to ambition. Moses walked away without making a sound, but from that night, his silence no longer came from fear. It came from a man gathering the courage to speak when the moment arrived. That moment approached under the glitter of Veronica's birthday celebration. The preparations began 2 weeks before the event and expanded until the entire mansion moved like a private hotel. Designers came and went, caterers tested menus, florists delivered imported arrangements, and event planners mapped camera positions in the garden. Veronica reviewed guest lists with the attention of a queen planning alliances. Ministers' wives, CEOs, socialites, old money families, new money sharks. Everyone who mattered would attend and be photographed. Damien liked the idea because he saw the night as perfect theater. Adora would stand beside him, dressed in diamonds, and everyone would see that he had transformed ordinary clay into something worthy of his name. Grace moved through the preparation rooms like a shadow while Veronica issued instructions. "Look at these fabrics," Veronica said one afternoon, holding up embroidered wrappers. "These are for important guests only, ministers' wives, CEOs, women who understand class." "They are beautiful, madam," Grace said softly. Veronica then handed her 5 invitation cards. "1 for you, 4 for whoever you choose. Make sure they are presentable." Grace blinked in surprise. "Thank you, madam." But Veronica was not finished. "And another thing. On the night of my birthday dinner, you will wear your staff uniform." Grace's face changed. "My uniform, madam?" "Of course. Let us not confuse people. Just because your daughter is marrying my son does not suddenly make you one of my guests." Grace tried once. "Madam, I thought perhaps—" "Thought what?" Veronica snapped. "That you would sit beside senators and businesswomen because of an engagement? Know your place, Grace. On that night, you will do what you have always done. Serve." Grace lowered her head and whispered, "Yes, madam." When Adora saw her mother in uniform on the evening of the banquet, something inside her recoiled. "Mama, why are you dressed like this?" Grace tried to smile. "Madam asked me to wear it." "This is too much," Adora whispered. "This is cruelty." Grace touched her hand quickly. "Keep your voice down. Endure a little longer. Your final exams are close. Let nothing scatter your future." "Mama, peace has already scattered." Moses approached them quietly. "Are you all right, Madam Grace?" "I am fine," she lied. Moses shook his head. "No, you are not. But I understand why you are trying to be." Adora looked at him with tired eyes. "Sometimes I feel like running away, Uncle Moses. Sometimes I feel like disappearing." Moses' voice softened. "If you run, run toward your dignity, not away from fear. Just remember, silence can protect a wound only for so long before it begins to rot." By sunset, the mansion had transformed into spectacle. The entrance glowed with warm lights. Soft jazz drifted from the terrace. Crystal glasses chimed beneath laughter, and camera flashes lit faces already practiced in public beauty. Veronica descended the staircase in silver and emerald, like a woman determined to be remembered. Chief Adebayo stood beside her, dignified, though more reserved than the mood around him. Damien wore a black tuxedo cut to perfection. Adora stood at his side in a deep wine gown that made her look regal even through her unhappiness. The guests noticed immediately. "They look beautiful together," one woman said. The girl is stunning, another murmured. Damien enjoyed the attention like applause meant for him alone. He leaned slightly toward Adora and murmured, "Smile." "I am smiling," she whispered. "No, smile properly. People should look at these pictures and think you belong here." The photographer approached. "Sir, madam, just a little closer." Damien pulled Adora nearer and said loudly, "Closer, of course. She is my fiancée. She should at least look grateful." Adora's voice trembled. "Damien, please, not tonight." But he had already entered the intoxication of performance. "Why not tonight? Tonight is perfect. My mother's charity banquet. Half of Lagos in one room. Cameras everywhere. This is exactly where people should see how far I have brought you." A few guests laughed uncertainly, thinking perhaps this was elite humor. Then Damien continued, and cruelty stopped pretending to be wit. "Beautiful, yes," he said to the group gathering near them. "But do not be deceived. If you saw her a year ago, you would not believe this is the same woman. This gown she is wearing tonight costs more than her mother has earned in years." Adora felt the room tilt. "Please stop," she whispered. "Why?" Damien said louder. "I am praising you. Without me, you would still be walking around in dull dresses, carrying files for your mother, and pretending simplicity is class." Some guests exchanged uncomfortable glances. One man asked, "Is that really true?" Damien smiled with devastating arrogance. "Very true. Her mother works in our house. Yet look at Adora now. Diamonds, silk, cameras. Sometimes all a woman needs is a rich man to rescue her from ordinary life." Grace, who was passing nearby with a tray, froze as if struck. Adora's eyes filled instantly. Damien was not finished. He lifted a glass slightly and said with poisonous charm, "Ladies and gentlemen, meet my fiancée. Educated, polished, beautiful. Though, if you met her before us, you would have sworn she belonged in the background, not in front of cameras." That was when Moses stepped forward from the edge of the room. "Stop," he said quietly but clearly. The words sliced through the music. Damien turned with disbelief. "What did you say?" Moses stood straighter than anyone had ever seen him. "I said enough." The room fell silent, even the hired violinist pausing mid-note. Veronica's voice snapped. "Moses, watch your mouth." But Moses had crossed the point fear usually controls. "I have driven this family for 20 years, he said, "and I have never seen anything as shameful as a man humiliating the woman he claims he wants to marry." Damien stepped toward him. "You old fool. Do you know who you are talking to?" Moses did not move. Yes, a boy raised by wealth but starved of character. Gasps burst through the crowd, and phones began rising openly now, no longer pretending courtesy. Veronica's face burned with rage. "Security!" Moses lifted his voice before anyone could drag him away. A real man does not turn a woman's pain into entertainment. You insult her because you think wealth is permission. It is not. It is only a test. And you are failing it in front of everyone. Damien shouted, "Get out of my sight!" Moses replied, "Not this time. This girl has swallowed humiliation in silence. Her mother has bent herself in loyalty for years, and this is the reward? Mockery? If this is your class, then poverty has better manners." Adora stood frozen, tears streaming silently down her face, while Grace looked torn between terror and gratitude. Chief Adebayo's face had gone cold with a kind of horror deeper than anger, because he had finally seen with his own eyes the ugliness he had hoped discipline would one day cure. The guests were no longer guests. They were witnesses. And across the shining floors of the Adebayo mansion, the first crack had opened in the foundation of a family that had always believed in money. The silence after Moses spoke did not feel like ordinary silence. It felt like the whole mansion had inhaled shock and forgotten how to breathe. Then the room exploded into whispers, raised phones, and the ugly electricity of scandal being born in real time. Damien stood frozen, rage burning across his face. He had never been challenged like that in public, not by an employee, not before the same society whose approval he had spent his whole life treating like a throne. Veronica recovered first. She straightened her shoulders and snapped at security to remove Moses at once. But the damage had already escaped the walls of the mansion. Guests were already sending clips to group chats, gossip pages, and bloggers who lived for rich family disgrace. Adora stood in the middle of it all, feeling as if her skin had become glass. Every eye in the room had seen her pain. Every cruel sentence Damien had used as entertainment now floated through the air like smoke that would not clear. Grace wanted to run to her daughter, but years of trained submission held her feet in place. She was still carrying a tray in uniform, while society women stared at her with the new excitement that comes when the poor are publicly attached to upper-class humiliation. Chief Adebayo looked at his son, and for the first time did not see immaturity or recklessness. He saw moral failure, and that frightened him more than scandal ever could. Damien tried to regain control by laughing at first. It was the weak laugh of a man who could feel power slipping and did not know how to catch it. He told the room it was all being exaggerated. He said Moses had forgotten himself.
But no one laughed with him now. Because insult always sounds different once someone names it for what it is. Cruelty loses glamour when truth stands beside it. Moses was not shouting. He was not trembling. He was simply standing in the center of wealth with the calm dignity of a man who had decided that consequences were no longer heavier than silence. That calm made his words even more dangerous. Security hesitated, because even they could sense the room had changed. Veronica saw their uncertainty and hissed at them again. This time, they stepped forward and took Moses by the arms. But even as they did, he kept his eyes on Damien and said in a low, steady voice, "Some people think expensive clothing can cover an empty soul. But shame always finds a way to show its face." Damien lunged as if to strike him, but Chief Adebayo caught his wrist with such force that the younger man stopped instantly. "Do not add violence to disgrace," Chief Adebayo said through clenched teeth. Damien snatched his hand away and looked around, only to realize that his audience was no longer with him. He was being watched, not admired. Adora turned away from him then, because if she kept looking, she feared she might break in front of everyone. Grace finally moved and gently took her daughter's arm. No words, no performance. Just a mother trying to hold together what another family had spent months tearing apart. The music had stopped completely. By the time the first guest quietly slipped out the front door, the banquet was dead. It was no longer a birthday celebration. It was evidence. By midnight, short clips of the confrontation were already spreading online. A video first appeared on a gossip account with the caption, "Driver humiliates billionaire heir for insulting fiancé." Within an hour, bigger platforms reposted it. Then came reaction channels, then influencers,
Then social commentators who slowed the footage down and replayed Damien's voice over Adora's expression, over Grace in uniform, over Moses stepping forward like conscience wearing a driver's badge. People were furious because the clip contained everything the public already suspected about powerful families: arrogance, class contempt, public humiliation disguised as benevolence, and one decent worker willing to say what everyone else would not. By 2 in the morning, Damien's name was trending with words like entitled monster and silver spoon tyrant. People who had never met Adora began defending her as though she were their sister. Users zoomed into the frame where Grace stood in uniform and called it the saddest image in the whole clip. Comment sections filled with anger and sorrow. Some said the rich always wanted gratitude without humanity. Some said the driver deserved a national award. Some said this was why money without character was a curse to society. Damien paced his room, watching his own face become a public villain frame by frame. He cursed the bloggers. He cursed Moses. He cursed the guests who had recorded the scene. He even cursed Adora for crying, as if her tears had betrayed him by making his words look crueler than they were. But deep down, he knew the truth. He had not been misunderstood. He had simply been seen. Veronica stormed through the house at dawn in a silk robe and fury. She called lawyers, spin doctors, political friends, people who had once cleaned scandals for senators and businessmen. She kept saying the same thing over and over. We must control the narrative. We must crush this before morning news picks it up. Damien sat on the edge of a chair with his tie hanging loose and his pride bleeding through his eyes. How do we do that? He asked. She stopped and looked at him with the cold, practical mind that had guided many quiet acts of cruelty. Make Grace and Adora record an apology. She said it as if discussing catering. They will say Moses acted alone. They will say he disrespected the family. They will say they remain grateful. Once the public sees them submit, the story will change. Damien lifted his head slowly. And Moses? Veronica's face hardened. I have already spoken to the commissioner. He will spend the night learning that bravery is expensive. That morning, Moses was picked up before sunrise on a meaningless charge disguised as disorderly conduct. Everyone in the servants' quarters understood what it was. Punishment 4. His wife cried when they took him, but Moses himself did not resist. He only asked one of the junior staff to tell Grace not to be afraid, because truth never dies simply because power slaps it. He was driven away in a police van before Chief Adebayo even knew what had happened. Grace and Adora were summoned before breakfast. Veronica was already dressed and composed, as if she had slept peacefully all night. A phone was placed on a stand in front of them. Start recording, she said. Grace's hands shook. Madam, please. Veronica's voice sharpened. Now. The camera light blinked on, and Grace looked smaller than Adora had ever seen her. She spoke slowly, as if swallowing stones. I apologize for the behavior of Moses at Madame Veronica's birthday celebration. He acted without our permission. My daughter and I remain grateful to the Adebayo family for everything they have done for us. Veronica nodded at Adora. Your turn. Adora stared at the lens and felt something inside her dying quietly. I am sorry for what happened at the party, she said in a voice that was almost soundless. Moses does not speak for us. I appreciate this family and the honor of becoming part of it. Veronica frowned. Louder. People must hear sincerity. Adora repeated the words, but this time tears slipped down her face while she spoke. Veronica did not stop recording. After the video was posted, Veronica expected sympathy. Instead, the internet turned even more vicious. The public saw the fear in Grace's eyes and the tears on Adaora's face. Commentators called it coercion, not apology. One woman on a news panel said no grateful person looks that terrified. A human rights blogger demanded an investigation into labor abuse and unlawful detention. By noon, what Veronica thought would clean the scandal had become proof that the family was hiding something. Chief Adebayo returned from an emergency board call to find the apology video already everywhere. He watched it once, and then again in silence. By the end of the second viewing, his face had darkened into something colder than anger. "What have you done?" he asked. Veronica tried to defend herself. "We were controlling the scandal." "No," he said quietly. "You turned cruelty into evidence." He demanded to know where Moses was. Veronica hesitated 1 second too long, and that hesitation told him enough. "Release him," Chief Adebayo ordered. "I will not have this family kidnapping honesty because it embarrassed us." Hours later, Moses was brought back from detention, tired but upright. His shirt was wrinkled, and there was a bruise near his temple that made Grace gasp when she saw him. Chief Adebayo took him into the study alone and closed the door. When they were seated across from each other, the older man did not begin with accusation. He began with something more difficult. "Why did you do it?" Moses looked at him for a long moment. "Because someone had to." Chief Adebayo leaned back. "But there is more in your eyes than anger. Say the full truth." Moses lowered his head, and for the first time since the banquet, his confidence seemed to carry sorrow with it. "There are truths I prayed would die before being needed. But maybe silence has become sin now." He reached into an old, worn leather bag he had carried for years and brought out a brown envelope stained at the corners. Chief Adebayo frowned. "What is this?" Moses placed it gently on the desk. "Do you remember David Nwosu?" The name hit the room like an old bell struck in a forgotten church. Chief Adebayo sat straighter. "Of course I remember David. He was my friend." Moses nodded slowly. "He was more than your friend, sir. He was one of the men who held up your life when it was collapsing. 22 years ago, when the bank froze your accounts and creditors were circling like vultures, David sold his family land in Nsukka and poured the money into your transport business. You and he signed an agreement in this city. I witnessed it as a young dispatch rider." Chief Adebayo's eyes moved to the envelope with sudden intensity. Moses continued. "After David died in that highway attack, he called me earlier that week and said, 'If anything happens to me, keep the duplicate copy. One day, truth may need a witness.'" Chief Adebayo's hands shook slightly as he opened the envelope. Inside were old documents, agreements, signatures, dates, and the kind of paper history forgets only because power helps it disappear. He read in stunned silence while Moses's voice continued like a quiet blade. "He did not call Grace a servant, sir. He called her family. He wrote clearly that his wife and child must never be treated as dependents or charity cases because their sacrifice was part of the seed of your company." Chief Adebayo swallowed hard. "I never saw this duplicate after David died." "Because Madame Veronica made sure the story disappeared," Moses said. "While you traveled during expansion, Grace was moved from the accounts office to domestic work. Staff were told she was just house help. She accepted it because she wanted Adaora educated and alive under your roof. She chose peace because survival was all she could afford. Chief Adebayo closed his eyes as if the room had become too bright to bear.
"And the girl my son humiliated," Moses finished. "She is the daughter of the man whose sacrifice helped save your empire." The study became a grave of old shame. Chief Adebayo had not forgotten David. He had mourned him. He had even provided for Grace and her child in practical ways over the years. But he had never known the truth had been reshaped inside his own house. He had helped them out of pity, when he should have honored them out of debt. The distinction crushed him. He rose from his chair so abruptly it scraped the floor. "Veronica!" he shouted. The whole house stiffened. At the family lounge, Veronica entered with Damien close behind, both wearing the strained defensiveness of people who sense control slipping away. Chief Adebayo threw the documents onto the center table. "Explain these." Veronica saw the papers and went pale in a way Damien had never witnessed. "Where did you get this?" she asked. "That answer is enough," Chief Adebayo said. "So it is true." Damien looked between them. "What is going on?" Chief Adebayo turned to him with a face like carved thunder. "The woman you mocked in public. The mother you reduced to staff in front of cameras. She is the widow of David Nwosu, the man whose money kept this company alive when I was drowning." Damien frowned as if the world was speaking a language he had never learned. "What?" Chief Adebayo's voice rose. "Grace was never supposed to live under this roof as charity. She was supposed to be protected with honor. David's sacrifice is part of the reason this family rose. Yet the truth was buried under pride and class anxiety." Veronica tried once to steady herself. "I did what was practical. A dead man's widow could not be allowed to start making claims." "Claims?" Chief Adebayo thundered. "She was owed respect long before your parties and your social circles were even possible." Damien stepped forward, helplessly. "Father, I did not know." Chief Adebayo cut him down with one look. "You did not need to know her hidden history to treat her daughter with dignity. Ignorance is not innocence." Then, in a voice lower and more terrible than shouting, he said, "The wedding is cancelled." Grace and Adaora were called into the sitting room, but this time no one stood over them with command. Chief Adebayo remained standing when they entered, as if sitting would insult the weight of what he had to say. "Grace, Adaora, I do not know how to begin." Grace instinctively tried to bow her head, but he stopped her. "No. Today, let me speak first. I failed David. I failed the trust he placed in me, and because I did not look deeply enough into what was happening under my own roof, I failed you too." Grace's eyes filled at once, but she said nothing. Adora stood very still, not from coldness, but from exhaustion. She had no energy left for ceremony. Chief Adebayo continued, "From today, there will be no wedding. You owe my son nothing. Grace, your retirement starts now. The business I promised will still be yours, not as compensation for marriage, but as part of a debt long overdue." Grace began to cry with the kind of tears that come when survival finally loosens its grip. "If you wish," he told Adora, "you will complete your studies in peace. If after that you want a master's degree abroad, I will fund it. Not as favor, as responsibility." Adora listened and then said softly, "The first thing I want is Moses free and safe. He is the only one who risked himself for us." Chief Adebayo nodded. "He will return with honor." Damien still tried to speak to Adora later that evening,
because the collapse of his plan had left him standing face to face with himself, and he hated the reflection. "Adora, can we talk?" She looked at him from across the courtyard and said, "You may speak." He took a breath. "I did not know about your father." She stared at him for a long, quiet moment, and then said the sentence that would follow him for years. "Must a woman have hidden status before she deserves respect?" Damien had no answer, because there was none that could save him. She stepped closer, not with anger now, but with clarity. "You looked down on me because you believed I had no power. That is the truth. You made cruelty look normal. You made gratitude feel like chains. You turned my mother's labor into a joke, and my silence into convenience." "I am sorry," he said, but even to his own ears it sounded late and thin. Adora nodded once, as if acknowledging a fact, not receiving comfort. "Wrong is too small a word," she said. Then she walked away, leaving him with the first honest helplessness of his life. What followed in the next weeks was not quick healing, but deliberate correction. Chief Adebayo called in lawyers and forensic accountants. He wanted every document reviewed, every early record traced, every buried contribution restored to proper light. The findings only confirmed what Moses had revealed. David Nwosu had indeed injected life-saving capital into the transport venture in its fragile infancy. He had done so through land he sold at personal cost, believing in his friend, and in a future he would never live to enjoy. The duplicate agreement was authentic, and the pattern of how Grace had slowly been recast from protected family ally into silent domestic support was now impossible to deny. Veronica withdrew into brittle silence, but even her silence had lost authority. There are moments when a house continues standing, but the throne inside it dies. This was one of those moments. The lawyers presented a structure for repair. A trust in David Nwosu's name would be established for Adora. A fully stocked fabric showroom in Lekki would be transferred to Grace, with working capital and ownership papers. A scholarship fund for children of drivers, cleaners, and domestic staff would be launched under the David Nwosu Foundation, so the company would publicly tie its future to the dignity of labor. Chief Adebayo approved everything immediately. Publicly, he said, "We did our wrong publicly. We will correct it publicly too." Damien sat through the meeting like a man listening to the reading of a will, in which his pride was being divided into pieces. When the lawyers finished, he finally asked in a dry voice, "And my position?" Chief Adebayo did not even look at him. "Suspended indefinitely." "Father, if you cannot respect the people serving your table, you are unfit to sit at the head of it." Damien lowered his eyes, because for once, outrage could not find a clean exit. In the same meeting, Chief Adebayo turned to Moses, who had been standing at the back as usual, trying to look smaller than the moment allowed. And Moses returns, not as driver alone, but as Director of Logistics and Ethics Compliance. Let every worker in this company know that courage will not be punished in my house again. Moses stared in genuine shock. "Sir, I am honored." Chief Adebayo answered with a tired humility. "I should have listened sooner." The public statement happened outside the company headquarters, under a canopy of microphones and cameras. Reporters came expecting controlled damage management. Instead, they witnessed something rarer. A wealthy patriarch choosing truth over family vanity. Is it true your family forced a public apology from Grace and her daughter? One reporter asked.
Yes, Chief Adebayo replied. And it was wrong.
Is it true your son's wedding has been cancelled?
Yes.
And the viral video of your driver confronting your son?
Chief Adebayo turned toward Moses, where he stood awkwardly at the edge of the press line. That driver spoke with more integrity than everyone else in that room. Cameras swung toward Moses, who looked as though he wished the ground would kindly open and save him from sudden fame.
His name is Moses Adekunle.
Chief Adebayo continued.
He acted with courage. My family failed morally. And he reminded us that truth can come from the least expected voice. The press conference spread even faster than the scandal had, and public reaction shifted. Some remained skeptical, but many saw something unexpected. A powerful family, not merely denying wrongdoing, but naming it. Social media that had mocked and condemned now praised Chief Adebayo for refusing to hide behind wealth. Commentators said the driver had forced the conscience of the elite into daylight. Grace watched the broadcast from a modest guest sitting room, not as a servant now, but as a woman standing on the edge of restored identity. Adaora sat beside her, and neither spoke for several minutes. Sometimes relief is too sacred for immediate conversation. When the showroom keys were finally placed in Grace's hand, she looked at them as if they belonged to someone from another life. The sign had already been made. Nuosu Textiles and Home. She touched the lettering with trembling fingers and whispered his name. David. Chief Adebayo stood beside her and said quietly, he should never have disappeared. Grace's eyes overflowed again. Sir, after everything, I expected only peace, not restoration. He answered, sometimes peace is the door. Restoration is what walks through. Adaora hugged her mother tightly. You will never wear uniform for anybody again. Grace smiled through tears. No, never again. Adaora poured herself into her final year, with a new steadiness, as if reclaiming her life required movement. Architecture became more than study. It became language, structure, space, foundation, load balance. She understood all of it differently now, because she had lived inside a house whose moral design was flawed and watched truth force renovation. She graduated at the top of her class, and on the day her name was called for the Best Project Award, Grace cried openly in the audience, while Moses clapped so hard his palms stung. Chief Adebayo stood at the back, not claiming closeness, but honoring from a distance. When Adaora was asked to speak, she looked over the hall and said, there was a time I thought silence was the price of survival. But I have learned that dignity is not pride, and humility is not permission for abuse. I dedicate this to my late father, to my mother who endured more than anyone should, and to every worker who has ever been told their life matters less because their job is quiet. The applause rose like a wave, and in that sound was something more than admiration. It was witness. Veronica came to see Grace weeks later, without escorts, without makeup heavy enough to hide the fatigue in her face, and without the armor of social rank. She stood at the doorway of the new showroom and asked softly, "May I come in?" Grace answered, "You are already here." Veronica managed a painful nod. "I did not come to argue. I came to say what I should have said long ago. I wronged you. Grace said nothing, so Veronica continued, because silence now belonged to the wrong person. I saw your dependence and mistook it for weakness. I saw your gratitude and used it against you. I reduced your life so mine would feel superior. There is no excuse. Grace looked at her for a long time. No, there is not. Veronica swallowed. I am ashamed. Grace answered with calm that had cost her years to earn. Shame is a beginning, madam, not an ending. Veronica lowered her head. I do not ask you to forget. Only if your heart ever allows, forgive me. Grace replied, I have chosen peace. But peace is not pretending nothing happened. Veronica whispered, I understand. And for the first time, perhaps she did. Damien changed more slowly because ego does not collapse into character overnight. It resists. It bargains. It tries on blame like old coats. He shouted at first, then withdrew, then spent long hours alone, without music, without parties, without the easy applause of shallow friends. Toby stopped visiting as often because even opportunists know when a falling house is no longer worth circling. Vanessa sent one message that simply said, Now you know. He never replied. One evening, Damien entered his father's study without invitation and said, I got a job. Chief Adebayo looked up. In whose company? Not yours. A logistics firm in Port Harcourt. Entry-level operations. No Adebayo name on the application. Chief Adebayo studied him carefully. Why? Because for the first time in my life, Damien said slowly, I want to know whether I can survive without being carried by money. I want to be corrected by people who owe me nothing. I want to know who I am when my surname does not enter the room first. Chief Adebayo sat back, and something like difficult hope moved behind his eyes. That road will humble you. Good, Damien answered. I need humbling more than inheritance. There was a pause. Then Chief Adebayo said, Those are the first words from you in many years that sound like a man. Damien did not smile. I do not expect quick forgiveness. Then do not chase forgiveness, his father replied. Chase transformation. Months later, at a company recognition dinner, Moses was called to the stage under warm lights and long applause. He looked uncomfortable in the new suit Grace had insisted he buy, but there was pride in his bearing now, not because of title, but because title had finally followed truth rather than swallowed it. Tonight, we recognize an employee whose courage protected the soul of this company when silence might have buried it, the host announced. Mr. Moses Adekunle. Moses took the microphone and said, I only said what should have been said long before that night. Not many would have said it, the host replied. Moses gave a small, tired smile. Fear is expensive, but sometimes silence costs more. Adaora, who was seated beside Grace, felt tears rise again, because that simple sentence carried the cost of everything they had lived through. After the event, Damien saw Adaora near the parking lot beneath a row of quiet lights. He approached carefully, as one might approach a place once burned by his own hands. Adaora, congratulations on your new job, she said before he could begin. He was surprised. You heard. Father told Mama. He nodded. I did not stop you to reopen old wounds. I only wanted to say something once without defending myself. She waited.
Respect is not something you offer only when a person has value to you, he said finally. It is proof that you have value inside yourself. Adora regarded him with calm eyes. That is true. I do not expect another chance, he added.
Then do not ask for one, she answered. He nodded. I will not. I only wanted to say, I am sorry, without excuses. Adora let the silence sit between them for a moment, and then said, Then let this be the first honest thing between us. I forgive you. But forgiveness is not reunion. I know, he said. Become better anyway, she told him. I will try, he answered. And for once, there was no performance in his voice. In the years that followed, people would still remember the banquet clip, but not for the reason Veronica had feared most. They would remember it because it became the moment a lie cracked open. They would remember Grace not as the woman in uniform, but as the owner who rebuilt her life under her husband's rightful name. They would remember Adora not as a quiet girl displayed beside wealth, but as the young architect who walked into her future with dignity untouched by someone else's contempt. They would remember Moses as the driver who refused to let humiliation masquerade as class, and who proved that a title does not create integrity. It only reveals whether integrity was already there. They would remember Chief Adebayo as the man who was late to truth, but not too late to honor it. And they would remember Damien as the heir who learned in painful fragments that money can buy silence, but never character. The greatest turnaround in the story was never the showroom, or the trust fund, or the public statement. It was the moral reversal hidden underneath all of it. The people once treated as background became the ones who carried the deepest truth. The people who thought themselves powerful were exposed as spiritually small. The widow they tried to keep beneath service stepped into ownership. The daughter they tried to control stepped into freedom. The worker they thought too low to matter became the voice that saved the soul of a company. That is how life humiliates arrogance. It takes the very people pride has dismissed and makes them witnesses against it. So if there is a lesson in all this, it is not merely that the rich should be kind. It is deeper than that. It is that every human being carries a dignity that does not increase with diamonds and does not reduce with uniform. True greatness is never measured by money, clothing, accent, or family name. True greatness is measured by how safely other people can stand in your presence. Because the man who needs another person's shame to feel superior is already poor. And the one who protects dignity, even at personal cost, is already wealthy where it matters most.